Greetings and welcome to the Mount Rushmore podcast. My name is Jeff, and I'm joined as always by these crazy characters that occupy the sitcom of my life. And they are Richard.
What's the deal with podcasts? They're neither a pod and you don't cast them. What's the deal?
And Michael.
Howdy.
Richard and Michael, well, you know how they are. If one says tomato, the other says potato. That's how weird it is. But they do debate the most ubiquitous elements of any given subject. And this week we are debating the Mount Rushmore of secondary Seinfeld characters chosen by Richard. Why?
I love Seinfeld. And one of the things I love about Seinfeld is this incredible universe they built up around the show. Mm-hmm. So that it's not just the four main characters. It's how the four main characters bring in everything that's happening around them. And all these stories often interweave with each other, and characters that was a plot line for one of the characters 2 seasons ago suddenly comes back and someone else has to interact with them. Mm-hmm. And I think just Jerry Seinfeld and Larry David created this like perfect, kind of enclosed, hermetically sealed universe that everyone just keeps bouncing off of each other.
Mm-hmm. I do. It does strike me as similar to a series like The X-Files, where you had a monster of the week. Mm-hmm. So you have this entity, this idea or this fear or this something that's embodied by a person. Seinfeld and Larry David, as observational comedians, had these peeves that they ended up assigning to a guest star.
To particular people who would like just be the representation of those like, grievances.
What a great analysis.
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
So that's why you're here, Jeff.
That's why I'm here. God damn it. So Richard chose it. Michael, get us going.
I have 4 categories this week.
Woo! Categories.
They're George, Jerry. No, they're not.
That'd be pretty good,
one
though.
is basically a cast member. Second one is girlfriend or boyfriend. A one-off character. And co-worker.
Okay.
I also have categories this week. Might as well just get them out on the table.
Sure. Love to.
I got lovers. I got bosses. I got family.
Yep.
And I got friends.
I love it. Cool.
Well,
so it's such a big universe.
Categories are better than your category. On the Mount Rushmore of categories, Jeff, which is the better category?
Oh, I gotta vote even more.
Okay, so I guess my first is the one that's basically a cast member, and that is, of course, Newman.
Oh, fun.
Hello, Newman.
We all have enemies, whether they are self-inflicted.
Why are you pointing at me?
Oh,
that seems weird.
My gosh.
Huh.
If you notice, that is the mark of the Van Buren boys.
Yes.
That just a little nose.
A little nose thing, yeah.
We all have enemies that either we've made in life because of stupid slight, or you just have gotten to know someone way too well.
Yeah.
And Newman, is played by Wayne Knight, is one of those characters. He's you just hate him.
Yeah.
And I think Jerry Seinfeld, the comedian, not the Jerry Seinfeld, the comedian on the show, kind of addressed Newman as like, hey, he's just a guy that you just want to hate. You just need someone that you just hate for no reason. And, Newman is so irritating, and he's also hoity. He thinks he's above himself and above Jerry. He hates Jerry just because he doesn't think he's a very good comedian.
Right.
And I think also secretly he's jealous of Jerry for having dated Elaine.
Okay.
I think that's if you're gonna kind of peel back all the layers of Newman, you get down to like Jerry dated Elaine for a little bit, and that's about it. But he's just so wonderful, and he going through the list and looking up appearances of all of these different cast members, he's like, I don't know how many episodes there were, 150 maybe, 9 seasons times 20 episodes is what, 180?
He did 109.
Yeah.
109, that's it?
That's got to be more than that.
Yeah. Anyway, so like he's ranks the second in most appearances by secondary characters, with only having 48 appearances. So I think it's interesting to see a character who feels so ingrained in the show. He feels like the 5th cast member at times, either him or maybe George's parents. That he's only been on maybe a third of the episodes, but to have such a presence, I think is really what kind of pushed him over the top for me.
You were more correct, 180 for those people who wanted the answer to that. Yeah. So his presence was so consistent that when we unpack that movie or the show in our minds, we feel like he was kind of a regular, like Steve Martin on the original SNL. I always felt like he was an original cast member when he was not. He just guested so many times that he felt like an original guy. Was Wayne Knight? I feel like Wayne Knight's career. That's his name, right?
Yes.
For me, Newman blurs into his Jurassic Park character.
Oh, of course.
They're very much of the same.
Yeah. There's something about the way he as a performer uses his stature and uses
his heft.
His heft, yeah. To be that guy who kind of represents, for all Seinfeld's neuroses, he seemed to kind of keep a pretty tight ship. Like physically, he was thin. His place was all kind of clean. Wayne Knight seemed like he always was in a rumpled Hawaiian shirt with a Baby Ruth wrapper coming out of his pocket or something like that.
There's something just unctuous and sort of like you said, sort of like
what a great word.
Full of himself.
Yeah.
In his position with the post office.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very proud of what he does with the post office to the point of being like frightening.
I love that aspect of his character where he is both proud of being a postal worker, kind of like
it's a military.
No, like what's his name from Cheers?
Cliff.
Yeah.
But at the same time, kind of, the USPS is so open for jokes about it.
Mm-hmm.
Like he would talk on the as a employee about how the system is just. No one delivers 50% of the mail.
Yeah.
No one can get to that. It's impossible. Or how zip codes are all fraudulent.
Or sometimes it just sounds like he's talking about Nom.
Yeah.
Like he's been through the shit. Yeah.
He's gone through such an experience being a lifer there. He's so great in that he allows Kramer, because he's on the show, he's such a good friend of Kramer's.
Yeah.
He really allows Kramer to get into some really kind of harebrained ideas. And Kramer, is just this walking id. He's just this spasm of a person, and then to have someone that kind of grounds him but also goes along with him. I think just the physicality of some that
he's very Laurel and Hardy.
Yes, the tall skinny character next to the kind of shorter fatter character is always going to be the R2D2 and C3PO. The those two pairings, I think they make such an impact.
I think Sancho Panza.
I think you're right. I think that they brought Newman in whenever there's some sort of scheme that's so harebrained and like crazy that like they know that it's too much even for the regular characters.
Yeah.
Like you need somebody who is like going to get involved in some get rich quick scheme or something like that. That's when you need. Yeah. That's when you need to go to the bullpen.
Yeah.
Call in Newman.
Well, that's a cool first choice. Richard, what do you got?
All right. In my lovers category, I'm going with Elaine's on-again, off-again, on-again, off-again boyfriend, David Puddy.
Great.
Oh, yeah.
Started off as Jerry's mechanic, who's actually an honest mechanic, which I think kind of set the tone for his appearances moving forward. One of the things I think that set him, he's almost like a proto-Andy from Parks and Rec.
Oh, okay.
Just kind of like this
That's a good comparison.
big, dumb lug of a character who's, by contrast to almost everyone else in the Seinfeld universe, actually a decent person. But he just winds up has his quirks that drives Elaine crazy, and mainly because he's kind of not exactly too much going on in the brains. But he means well. He's a well-meaning kind of doof.
I think one of the big differences between like the Jerry character, who was always ticked off by someone's idiosyncratic nature or like the singular thing, and Elaine, Puddy is her ideal boyfriend, but she just wants him to be different.
Yeah.
Jerry is so willing to cast someone aside for the slightest offense that he doesn't want to change anybody. He's looking for someone that's already perfect.
Yeah.
Kind of. But he's looking for someone that will fulfill everything without. But I don't know. But like Elaine is just like, she wants Puddy, but he's like kind of dumb.
But she wants Puddy crossed with like JFK Jr.
Yes.
Basically she wants like smart Puddy.
Yeah.
And you're not going to get that. He's the
Silly
guy.
Puddy.
Yeah, he is silly Puddy. Very good, Jeff. He's the guy who paints his face like the New Jersey Devils mascot.
Yeah.
And scares a priest into a heart attack.
Mm-hmm.
That's who he is.
What I think is interesting is that sorry to jump on your role, these first two choices is that you can't really see Patrick Warburton in another role other than being Puddy. Like when he was in Emperor's New Groove as playing like a crunk, he was just kind of like Puddy.
Tick,
Yeah.
the Tick was kind of Puddy.
Yeah, his commercial that he does for, I think it's Allstate, is kind of just like
Yeah.
Puddy.
Even his intro to Soarin' Over California, he's Puddy. He's this guy who is gleefully unaware that he's always speaking like he's talking through a microphone.
Right.
And that he is not, even though he's handsome, he's not necessarily God's gift to everyone, but he's blissfully inobservant of his flaws.
Things that he loves: the Devils, Arby's, high fives, jackets with 8-ball sleeves and and on the back, or
that's right,
or fur coats.
I do feel like what unites many of the characters in a story like Seinfeld or in this New York, very kind of Jewish kind of comedy world that has been developed over many years by not just Seinfeld but many other comedians, is that Puddy, the one thing Puddy doesn't hate is himself, and every other character the thing hates themselves. They hate something about themselves, much to the point where they overly scrutinize everybody else in their world because they do it to themselves.
That's funny you mentioned that, because Puddy, as we found out, is a Christian. And in one of the episodes, The Burning, he winds up, Elaine finds this out because he's got like a Christian rock station programmed into his AM FM. And he asks Elaine to steal a newspaper for him for some reason because she's going to hell anyway. So it doesn't really matter. And at the end, they wind up going to a priest to get some sort of guidance on what they should do with their relationship. And the priest says, well, you're both going to hell anyway because you're having premarital sex, which makes Elaine incredibly happy. And that is sort of the difference between the main Seinfeld characters and someone like Puddy.
Yeah.
Elaine is taking pleasure in the fact that she is dragging Puddy down to hell with her.
Yes.
Versus Puddy, who's just like, well, I'm going to heaven, you're going to hell. Okay, sort of thing.
Okay, Michael.
My next one is also a girlfriend or boyfriend. It's girlfriend. It's the character Jenna, as played by Kristen Davis on the episode The Pothole.
Okay.
Jerry,
I don't know this one.
You will by the time we
get
to it. Jerry dates a lot of women throughout the show. 60-something different girls that he's a bit affiliated with in some way or the other. And they all, like we've talked about, they all have a single thing wrong with them, whether it's Man Hands, who is beautiful and perfect in every way, and she just happens to have these huge gangly man hands. Yeah. Or it's the girls like Dolores, whose name he can't remember.
Or Janine Garofalo, who is actually like too close to him, right? Like too much of a carbon copy of him.
Yeah. Or there's a character, Ellen, who is perfect. And it upsets Jerry that she's perfect because she can't because he can't figure out why.
Yeah.
Jenna, on the other hand, is like the epitome of this, and it goes back to like his prissiness, where he's dating her, she's wonderful, and then he accidentally knocks her toothbrush in the toilet. He turns around, and the next shot is her brushing her teeth with it.
God! Yeah.
And he, as like a neat freak, and it's like this. He's so wound up, he can't get over it until he does. On the episode, he gets through it. He you see like this growth in this character. Like, she is actually worth it.
Yeah.
Okay, this is crazy. She kind of enacts this revenge on him, where she puts something of his in the toilet, and he discovers it's the toilet plunger.
Yeah.
So he's like, oh, I got, he's scrubbing his house down because she's told him, oh, I've put something of yours in the toilet. He can't figure it out. He's driving himself crazy. He gets over it. And then, of course, at the end of the episode, she gets covered in sewage. And he's just like, I can't do that. I love the idea that there's a character that he tries so hard to change for.
Yeah.
And no matter what, that it was never going to happen. And she's great. She's like super sweet and funny and just intelligent, but just like that first thing, they always find something.
Yeah.
It's such a unique show that, like you said, like the monster of the week element. I think I really...
You know who the monster of the week is?
Oh, it's all
Jerry.
Yeah.
Jerry.
All the time,
he's always
constantly the monster.
Well, those characters went from being just kind of eccentric to being terrible human beings in the course of
it's like the opposite.
4 seasons in, like the switch had turned and they're like, oh yeah, where we're just going to go all in on them all being awful.
It's like the opposite of character growth. It's like character de-evolution.
Yeah.
You know, the longer the show went on, the more they were with each other and enabling each other, like the worse they were. And that extends to Jerry with his, you know, nonstop paramours and dalliances, where there's just always something that he's able to find. And as the series goes on, it goes from being like things that are like, I think probably more realistic or more honest.
For sure.
And then as the show kind of keeps going on, and I don't know if this is almost that they ran out of things that they could do that were like big obvious things, like walking around in your bra the whole time.
Was that Sue Ellen Mitchell?
That's Sue Ellen Mitchell, yeah. Eventually getting to the point where it's like the very minor or these really ridiculous things. So I think that's part of the de-evolution of these characters. That they get worse as they go on.
Yeah. It does seem like in Larry David's follow-up, Curb Your Enthusiasm, it seems like he's weaponized that ability to get to bad behavior more quickly.
Right.
Or judgment of others or inability to change.
He just starts on that, and that's all it is.
Yeah.
All right, so my next pick is Frank Costanza in terms of the family.
Okay.
My family pick.
Nice.
Co-creator of The Man's Ear.
The Bro.
Also known as The Bro. Inventor of the Stop, Short, and Grab. And Festivus. Yeah, you mentioned Kramer being pure id. I think of Frank Costanza as being this like idea of id. Like he has like no filter, right? Whatever is going through his head at that particular moment is what he's going to blurt out.
Yeah.
In that very distinctive sort of Frank Costanza way, which apparently, at least for the first appearance of him, Jerry Stiller had trouble remembering the lines.
Oh, really?
So that's why he would kind of talk like like this.
Yeah.
Because like he would just like the lines would come to him like in these like little blocky like elements. So that's sort of where the character voice and tonality came from, which I find kind of wild.
Yeah.
But he has no filter. He's just this incredibly self-centered person who just whatever is bothering him at the moment, he's just going to let everybody know.
Yeah.
Versus someone like George, I mean, you wonder what it was like growing up in that household. He's almost like the exact opposite. He internalizes all of these grievances and things that are wrong until they eventually, become his downfall.
I thought it was always interesting the way the show involved the parents, especially for George and Jerry, to see how these maniacal people became who they are. You can understand why Jerry is so pent up and George is, bouncing off the walls, because to live in that environment would drive anybody to turn into George. To turn him into just this raving liar and
have a dad who wakes up, wakes his mom, George's mom up, Estelle, when she faints after the finale when they get sentenced to a year, and immediately says, "We got to go. We got to beat traffic." Not, oh my God, our son got, no, we need to get back to New York and we need to beat traffic.
It's just a sense of their priorities are so, off the deep end that you understand why George's priorities are so off the deep end too.
And he's basically the main character of Festivus, which is, I think, my favorite Seinfeld episode ever. So it would be hard for me to not include him just based on that. But they've just brought up these, again, when I talk about there's this world of Frank Costanza that we know about, even though he's not a main character. Like, he's horrible fear of mice. He loves squirrels, on the other hand. Never takes his shoes off because he thinks people's feet have bad smell. So if he doesn't take his shoes off, he'll be fine. Loves yelling at George Steinbrenner about past trades and deals that were made. Why'd you trade Buhner for Phelps? That sort of thing. And he is this, like, he's one of those characters that, like, you can just throw him into a scene and it automatically just completely, like, throws everything off the rails in a good way. But as soon as Frank Costanza makes an appearance, everything goes like bonkers.
Yeah, a little bomb goes off. And
yeah, exactly.
I love that in another show, they might use the parents to create an apology or to kind of give some forgiveness to the character. It seems like in Everybody Loves Raymond, we've got this neurotic Ray character, but then you see his parents, they live with him. You see he did not fall too far from the tree.
You see where how he became that.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, I get that.
Yeah. In Seinfeld, there's such a policy of no hugging, no learning that,
Right.
that the parents are just there to just kind of create even more chaos. Yeah.
And George is there to disappoint them regularly, so you can see why they're always yelling at him.
Yeah. Cool. So, am I right that we are at halftime? Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, we are at halftime, and want to thank you so much for being a listener of the Mount Rushmore podcast, and invite you to do more. Come on, it's like pledge time at the political radio station. We want to ask you to do more, contribute more. Go online to our iTunes and Stitcher pages and leave a review or rating if you would, and then join us on our Facebook site and join the conversation by suggesting topics or giving feedback on topics that we have done already. You could join some of the dozen or so people who have ended up being on the show. If you got like a great topic, we might Skype you in. There's another way that you can participate. You can go to Instagram. You can go to Twitter. You can talk to us there. And you can go to Audible, audible.com. And you should actually go to audibletrial.com/Rushmore, audibletrial.com/Rushmore. And there's something waiting for you there, and that something is a free audiobook. That's right, for you, the listeners of Mount Rushmore Podcast, a free audiobook download with a free 30-day trial to give you the opportunity to try out Audible. You could try out Enough Rope with Andrew Dunn. No, actually, no, wait. You could try out My Seinfeld Year by Fred Stoller. I read this book. It's pretty awesome. It really talks about how the writers would get these stories on. They would have some kind of idiosyncratic experience with a date or a relative or a friend, and then pitch them. And this is about the year that comedian Fred Stoller spent on Seinfeld. So that is there on Audible. Over 180,000 other titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. And you know what? We like to help other people in the podcast community, of which we are a part. And we do that by helping promote their podcasts. So if you want to hear new cool podcasts, try this one.
Transmission commencing.
This is Wookiee Radio. Translated for the Wookiee impaired. I like that Wookiee. Your hosts, Ken, Derek, and Mike, bring you the latest news and commentary from the far reaches of the galaxy.
Hold it. I said hold it.
Subscribe today on iTunes and Stitcher.
I just assumed he's a Wookiee.
Start listening today, and remember,
The Force will be with you, always.
And now we are back. So, we are debating the Mount Rushmore of second-tier Seinfeld characters. And, Michael, what do you got?
For my one-off category is the Bizarro gang of Kevin, Feldman, and Gene. Kevin, the character of Kevin, was a boyfriend of Elaine's, and they broke up, and then he suggested that they just be friends. Mm-hmm. And she was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
And he was good at that.
Wow.
She discovered a person that was very much like Jerry, but just in the exact opposite ways. Who's not neurotic, who's not a mean person. Mm-hmm. And eventually she's introduced to his two friends, Gene, who's a counterpart to Bizarro, to George, a.k.a. Bizarro George, and Feldman, who is the alternate version of Kramer. And the entire episode is built around this idea of, if you know Superman comics, or if you know like Superman lore, of the Bizarro Superman, who is like Superman in every way, except he does everything backwards, which leads to this wonderful exchange where Jerry is explaining it to Elaine, how Bizarro says bad bye instead of goodbye. She's like, well, why doesn't he say like he says goodbye when he arrives and hello when he leaves. And she says, well, why doesn't it say bad bye? Isn't that the opposite? And like, so he's trying to get it into her head, and she doesn't actually care. She's just the rules are stupid. The rules are stupid for Bizarro anyway. So she's just like, I would rather hang out with these people who are nice.
But then I like this because it plays on the fact that we've established that Jerry is like a Superman nut.
Yes.
So it plays on something that we've built up over the years.
When he dated a girl too in an episode whose name was Lois for one episode, just and only because she looked like Lois Lane and had his name.
Yeah.
But an interesting thing about the Kevin character was that if you go into his apartment, he has a Bizarro Superman statue in there, just in the
that's
background,
hilarious. Yeah.
just kind of tucked away.
Yeah.
But I love that these characters. There's even like a Bizarro Newman named Vargas. That they do like the same sort of bit with Kevin, where like Elaine's over and this guy Vargas, and he's like, "Hello, Kevin." He says, "Hello, Vargas." And then they're friends. It's everything is in their world is upside down.
Yeah.
And I don't remember what led them to end that relationship.
I
think
know this one
did they
because-
just kind of walk away? Or
No, because something happens and Elaine gives the "get out of here" and like pushes.
Oh yes,
And he winds up pushing him down, and they're like, "Why did you push him?"
her kind of playful anger.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're like, "You're way too angry to hang out with us." And so she basically blows it by just basically being
Yeah.
herself.
There's no Bizarro Elaine, I guess.
I love that moment where it takes a Samuel Beckett kind of turn. Like these characters are all basically in this limbo hell where they are doomed to meet people who are either placed there just to raise their ire, and they're stuck with each other. So they'll be here and Godot will never show up.
Right.
They'll be stuck with them forever. Or if they were to find something good, they wouldn't know how to deal with it. They would crush it like the bunny rabbit and Mice and Men.
Well, that's the finale, right? They're just sort of doomed to sort of like sit there and talk. I mean, they wind up talking about
And repeating the same joke.
the same joke from the series premiere. It's
Yeah.
just like their lives, like you said, no learning, no touching.
Yeah.
Nothing ever gets better and nothing ever changes. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do like that there is just an alternate world of the Seinfeld universe where everything is exactly the opposite.
Yeah.
Where Jerry's parents are not crazy. What is George's parents like? They must be really warm and
Reserved,
yeah.
quiet, keep to
Or,
themselves.
Okay, who's next?
All right, I'm next in my bosses category. I'm going with George Steinbrenner
All right.
as voiced, not physically embodied by,
Yeah.
but voiced by Larry David. One of the 2 times we hear him on the show. The other time being as George Costanza's lawyer, who wears a cape for no good reason, which I just love. And I actually thought about putting him on the list just because that would have embodied, I think, every bizarre, one-off character who has these quirks that we don't know where they came from or what they have to do with anything. Nobody decided to go with a Steinbrenner. And I like this pick because Seinfeld has this tradition of taking sort of celebrities or pop culture figures and just putting them through this like kaleidoscope and twisting it.
Yeah.
Then whatever you get back is this almost Bizarro version of who that celebrity or that person really is.
It was always interesting how they incorporated the real world into it felt like because he worked for the Yankees. It's like, oh, that's a real thing. They didn't make up their own New York.
The New York Knights or
Yeah,
something.
Yeah, they Kenny Rogers Roasters is a thing that actually exists, and that store played a big part into an episode. It's strange to see how they do that. How they're just like, oh, we're just going to reference a real thing, and everyone will just know. And it kind of grounds them in New York. Obviously, it's a kind of this fantasy land, New York that they live in, but it's. Oh, well, the Yankees. Yeah, I know the Yankees. I know who George Steinbrenner is. I know he's kind of a kook.
Right.
And then they just kind of,
They just
amp
play
it
it up to the nth degree and just have Steinbrenner be a complete raving, rambling lunatic who just makes George's life a living hell. But also at the same time, George becomes somewhat successful almost by accident just because Steinbrenner has no ability to sort of grasp the idea of quality.
Yeah.
He's so busy firing people that he's so busy, I think, firing people for little things.
Yeah.
That George's gross incompetence doesn't register with him. So he just knows George as the guy who was eating a good calzone.
Yeah.
And so then he would have lunch every day with him because he wanted to get the calzones. And that's just how his brain worked. It's almost like a primitive sort of brain.
2 things. One, it's almost Trumpian that George Stein that this character would be surrounded by this strange cast of ineptitude, but would keep them on because he keeps getting distracted by something else.
Yeah.
And 2, I love the idea, and I don't know if this is what actually happened. I would love the idea of George when they play against him, if the guy was just gestating and doing all these motions without saying anything. I hope that they just did the ADR.
Oh, yeah.
for him in the app. But I would just love the idea if it was just like silent, and then like George eventually would have to choose, or what's the actor's name? That plays George.
No,
Jason Alexander.
Yeah, Jason Alexander would have to just choose a moment when to jump in. He'd be like, okay, 15 seconds of ranting.
Yeah.
There's someone off stage going,
Yeah. I would hope that like that scene and that set would be like just perfectly silent of just like.
Yes. Yeah. There was there was a BuzzFeed thing or something that said they actually taped Steinbrenner a couple times for the show.
There's one time that they taped Steinbrenner, and the real Steinbrenner was going to take Elaine to George's wedding, and Larry David said they recorded it. He flew out, recorded it, flew back. They looked at it and said, he's not an actor.
Yeah.
And we can't use this. So he had to call George Steinbrenner up and tell him he was cut.
That's funny.
From the episode.
Wow.
And
That's hilarious.
And of course, Steinbrenner's like, you can tell me what it is. I'm a big boy. I'll take it. You know. I just love this character who is just like at this. You said Trumpian, and Larry David's characterization of Steinbrenner has an element of Trump.
Yeah.
To him, and that it's just sort of stream of consciousness.
Yeah.
You don't know where these like he'll call George in the office and go, "Hey, George, how's it going? So I hear you're a communist." What? Or like he'll just get going down these like thought processes where you're like, where the hell is this coming from? Where is it going? You're making no sense. You're rambling. Very Trumpian.
The Seinfeld seems to be a product of Larry David and Jerry Seinfeld criticizing the world and developing observational material about it. And it seems like with Steinbrenner, they probably spent many of their times as Yankees fans asking themselves, what is he thinking? And then now they have the opportunity to actually put words in his mouth.
$16 million for Hideki Arabu? What were you thinking?
What were you thinking? Okay, Michael.
My last choice is under the employee or coworker. It's a boss like Steinbrenner, but it's J. Pederman.
Oh, fun.
It's played by John O'Hurley, owner of the J. Pederman catalog. In another instance where they involved a real life. And I didn't know that growing up.
Who was this guy? Yeah, you didn't know he was real. Okay.
No, I didn't know that the J. Pederman catalog existed. I assumed it was just a play on J. Crew.
Yeah.
But I guess there's just a whole other...
Oh, yeah, yeah.
It's just a big thing.
Yeah.
And he's like this world-traveling, eccentric, kind of Richard Branson-esque mixed with... God, I got to think of who else the other...
He's like the most interesting man in the world.
Yes, that is exactly it. It's like the most interesting man in the world.
And if Hemingway had a catalog...
that is exactly who it is. And he... eventually, Elaine she gets a job working for him as a writer on his catalog, because he encounters her on like this rainy night, and she's crying. She lost her job. I think she'd lost her job, the Mr. Pitt job or whatever she did there. I don't even know what she does.
She was an editor for right. Mr. Pitt.
Yes.
Yeah.
Who was the one that she worked for that was like she would cut up, like she was like an assistant to?
I think I was originally Mr. Pitt. That might have been.
There was, I'm getting it all mixed up. Anyway, but he encounters her on like this very romantic sort of setting. Romantic, not in a love way, but romantic and very swept up into the thing, and she ends up kind of dazzling him with her use of language, and gets a job writing for hats, describing hats, melodramatically. But he is this character that's this bombastic and insane, and has ridiculous things that he says, and he ruins Elaine's life and also promotes her at the same time. Yeah. So he goes off to Burma. And or Myanmar, as they, and she gets elevated to the role of CEO or head of the company for no reason. Yeah. And then she has to fill in this role as dealing with all these other underlings and make these decisions. But he's just so eccentric and so interesting, and but like self-imposed eccentric. He's my favorite character on the show.
Yeah. What's so funny, and this might tip my hat in terms of judging, is I feel like John O'Hurley and Patrick Warburton fall into this kind of same category of character that Ted Knight would have played. This guy who's speaking in all caps at the people around him and has this puffed out chest and moves forward through the lives of these neurotic people with this self-confidence that they could never muster.
Right.
And oblivious to his fractured logic and silly idiosyncrasies that he has. And
there's no one there to call him on it.
Yeah. They're usually that person who's speaking through a megaphone on top of this lifeguard chair to the world around them, and these neurotic characters can't even take a swipe at him. So
right, he's so far afield from real life.
Yeah,
it is interesting that between John O'Hurley and Patrick Warburton, you've got these two characters with these two actors with these like just amazing voices.
Yeah,
that just use them to like. Instead of using them to command respect and authority, it's just they use them to be either dumb as a rock or bombastic or something. It doesn't actually translate to anything positive.
Yeah.
One thing I did like was that it was a character that actually interacted with the other characters on the show.
Uh-huh.
Like unlike George Steinbrenner, who you primarily see interacting with George, like he bought Kramer's life stories for $50.
Yeah.
And I loved that idea that Kramer would try to tell a story and then realize, oh no, I sold these to this person that is like already eccentric.
Yeah.
But needed more. He found it's like there's this guy that was already more eccentric than him, and he was like, I'm so wealthy I can just buy him. And of course he buys him for a pittance.
Okay, Richard.
All right,
take it on home.
my last one, and this is in the category of Friends. And this is an oft-mentioned friend, although never seen. Bob Sacamano. This is Kramer's unseen friend who's always getting into something insane. That guy's a real psycho. He's that guy.
He's the one that you'd buy like rat hats out.
Well, he's the one that, like, for example, when
Bob Sacamano. They have the best names on the show.
Names, yeah.
He's the one that when Jerry starts to turn into Kramer, he's like eating his ice cream one day, and Elaine needs like a fuzzy hat. Well, Kramer's friend, Bob Sacamano, he sells Russian hats over there, Battery Park, for $40. I mean, they're not quite as good, but the difference is negligible.
Yeah.
That is, the difference is negligible is my favorite line from the entire series.
The difference is negligible.
Just the way that he just speaks it so frantically, and it's that is so perfect. I love that you brought that up.
Yeah, it's the perfect someone doing somebody else, and he nailed it like really well. So things that Bob Sacamano has done. He went to the hospital for a hernia operation, and it got screwed up. So he now sits in a chair by a window, repeating, "My name is Bob," in a high pitched voice. He was in a mental institution once, but his synapses were so large that the electroshock therapy didn't do anything for him. Let's see. He got a job at a condom factory, and he gave Kramer all the defective condoms. Just stuff like that. Like one time Bob got rabies. It's just like anytime that they need something, it's like, oh, Bob Sacamano, he can help you out with this. And it's like, no, he can't.
Yeah.
Because he's a completely insane person.
Yeah.
And I just love this idea that there is one person in the world that is like Kramer's Kramer.
That's a really good point.
You know, who is the person, like, I'm sure if Jerry is talking to other people about Kramer, they're like, wait, this can't be a real person.
Yeah.
This is insane. That Kramer's got that one person that even to him is like, oh, this guy's crazy. That sort of thing. I just, again, about the idea of this entire Seinfeld universe, like you said, this almost like play world version of New York. I just love the idea that, friends of like, you can go 2 or 3 levels deep, and you've got these people with these ridiculously, thorough storylines.
Well, that is a funny reading. Well, during the halftime, I plugged that Fred Stoller book, and while reading Fred's book, it was fascinating for me to find further evidence that it seemed like Larry David and Jerry Seinfeld, and to the extent that the writers on that show actually did contribute stories, from what I understood, Larry and Jerry always wrote the final draft, but that they were essentially creating the DNA, chronicling the DNA of New York weirdos, and this group of people who make up this kind of nucleus and this basic helix of this DNA, and then adding all these other people to the strand. And all these characters do such a good job of kind of adding to the genetic material of the show and making it this cesspool of viral matter that you just don't even want to get any close to. But I do find it fascinating that and very generous, because here is a America's leading comedian at the time who was able to open up his show to be upstaged by so many characters that were actually much more interesting than
even
than he
characters
was.
that didn't exist.
Characters who are off stage mentioning these people, yeah.
Characters who came up with the idea for the rubber band on the rubber band and paddle ball thing. That's how he made his millions.
That's how he made his millions.
But, yeah, I mean, like you said, it's almost like he realized he was sort of what everyone else should be bouncing off of.
Yeah.
You know? And I think that was a really smart decision. If it was Seinfeld, but it was about Jerry Seinfeld, I don't think the show would have worked, or wouldn't have worked as well. So I think that's when we're talking about this world. We were talking about this whole topic and why I kind of came to it. It is that idea of you've got 4 basically equals, and they each have their own worlds and how they collide, and that's where the show gets really fascinating.
What if it was a show where someone is forced to become someone's butler?
Whoa.
Because he can't pay something off, so he's going to be his butler.
That
would be a great show.
I love it. I do feel like, now that we're kind of talking about the show in general, Ricky Gervais in many of his after The Office characters has done the Larry David thing writ large by bringing to the screen this character who has the inability to do the right thing or see his flaws, and spends the whole show doubling down on all these horrible behaviors. And in Extras, he did have a kind of a nemesis too that was very Wayne Knight-ish. Yes, but yeah, that is a great analogy. I feel like Jerry and the rest of the cast are like the pinballs, and everybody else is like the flippers and bumpers that they all get knocked around from. All right, guys, this has been a very, very, very kind of even, so a lot of great choices. And so, honestly, I'm just going to grab a few because you guys had very compelling justifications for all of these. And in a way, some of it was getting my mental DVR and playing some back, and some reminding me of something new. Michael, because he does seem to be, Jerry's the leader of this gang, and he's Jerry's nemesis. So I'm going to go with Newman. And I've forgotten all about Bob Sacamano, Richard, so I'd like to grab that one. And then because they were, I think, very kind of similar I think of these characters as kind of similar, I want to do with Puddy and then do Jay Pederman. So I think we're 2 and 2.
Yeah.
All right. Okay.
Even Stevens.
Right.
Even Stevens. All right. So thank you, audience, for listening. This has been the Mount Rushmore podcast. I, as usual, am Jeff.
I'm Richard.
I'm Michael.
Cheers, man. Let's go fishing.